Hello, and this is Miss Yetter, and we are continuing our saga of Hollow City, the second novel in Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. We are on chapter 13, part 2. So if you'll turn in your books with me to page 374, we will begin at the very top of the page. That was page 374. For a moment, I jolted awake in the dark and knew I was dreaming. But I didn't know where I was, only that I was not in bed anymore, not in the meeting hall with the others. I'd gone elsewhere, and the room I was in was all black with ice beneath me, my stomach writhing. Jacob, come here, where are you? A voice from outside, down the hall, a real voice, not something from a dream. And then I'm in the dream again, just outside the ropes of a boxing ring, and on the canvas, in the haze and lights, my grandfather faces off against a hologast. They circle each other. My grandfather is young and nimble on his feet, stripped to the waist, a knife in one hand. The hollow is bent and twisted, its tongues waving in the air, open jawed, dripping black on the mat. It whips out a tongue and my grandfather dodges it. Don't fight the pain. That's the key, my grandfather says. It's telling you something. Welcome it. Let it speak to you, the pain says. Hello, I am not other than you. I am the hollow, but I am you also. The hollow whips at me again. My grandfather anticipates it, makes room in advance for the strike. Then the hollow strikes a third time, and my grandfather lashes out with his knife, and the tip of the hollow's black tongue falls to the mat, severed and jolted. They are stupid creatures, highly suggestible. Speak to them, Yoga. And my grandfather begins to speak, but not in English, nor Polish, nor any language I've heard outside my dreams. It's like some guttural outgassing, the sounds made with something other than a throat or a mouth. And the creature stops moving, merely swaying where it stands, seemingly hypnotized, still speaking his frightening gibberish. My grandfather lowers his knife and creeps toward it. The closer he gets, the more docile the creature becomes, finally sinking down to the mat on its knees. I think it's about to close its eyes and go to sleep when suddenly the hollow breaks free of whatever spell my grandfather has cast over it, and it lashes out with all its tongues and impales my grandfather. As he falls, I leap over the ropes and run toward him, and the hollow slips away. My grandfather is on his back on the mat, and I am kneeling by his side, my hand on his face, and he is whispering something to me, blood bubbling on his lips. So I bend closer to hear him. You are more than me, Jakob, he says. You are more than I ever was. I can feel his heart slow, hear it somehow, until whole seconds elapse between beats, the tens of seconds, and then, Jacob, where are you? I jolt awake again. Now there was a light in the room. It was morning, just the blue beginning of it. I was kneeling on the ice in the half-filled room, and my hand wasn't on my grandfather's face, but resting atop the trapped hollow's skull. Its slow reptilian brain. Its eyes were open and looking at me, and I was looking right back. I see you. Jacob, what are you doing? I've been looking for you everywhere. It was Emma, frantic out in the hall. What are you doing? She said again. She couldn't see the hollow, didn't know it was there. I took my hand away from its head, slid back from it. I don't know, I said. I think I was sleepwalking. It doesn't matter, she said. Come quick, Miss Peregrine's about to change. Crowded into the little room were all the children and all the freaks from the sideshow, pale and nervous, pressed against the walls and crouched on the floor in a wide berth around the two Imbrams. Like gamblers in a backroom cockfight, Emma and I slipped in among them and huddled in a corner, eyes glued to the unfolded spectacle. The room was a mess. The rocking chair where Miss Wren had sat all night with Miss Peregrine was toppled on its side. The table of vials and beakers pushed roughly against the wall. Althea stood on top of it, clutching a net on a pull, ready to wield it. In the middle of the floor was Miss Wren and Miss Peregrine. Miss Wren was on her knees, and she had Miss Peregrine pinned to the floorboards, her hands in thick falcony gloves, sweating and chanting an old peculiar, while Miss Peregrine squawked and flailed with her talons. But no matter how hard Miss Peregrine thrashed, Miss Wren wouldn't let go. At some point in the night, Miss Wren's gentle massage had turned into something resembling an interspecies pro wrestling match crossed with an exorcism. The bird half of Miss Peregrine had so thoroughly dominated her nature that it was refusing to be driven away without a fight. Both Imbrams had sustained minor injuries. Miss Peregrine's feathers were everywhere, and Miss Wren had a long, bloody scratch running down one side of her face. It was a disturbing sight, and many of the children looked on with open-mouthed shock, wild-eyed and savage. The bird Miss Wren was grinding into the floor was one we hardly recognized. It seemed incredible that a fully restored Miss Peregrine of old might result from this violent display. But Althea kept smiling at us and giving us encouraging nods as if to say, almost there, just a little more floor grinding. For such a frail old woman, Miss Wren was giving Miss Peregrine a pretty good clobbering. But then the bird gabbed at Miss Wren with her beak, and Miss Wren's gasp slipped. And with a big flap of her wings, Miss Peregrine nearly escaped from her hands. The children reacted with shouts and gasps, but Miss Wren was quick, and she leapt up and managed to catch Miss Peregrine by her hind leg and thump her down against the floorboards again, which made the children gasp even louder. We weren't used to seeing our Imbram treated like this, and Bronwyn actually had to stop Hugh from rushing into the fight to protect her. Both Imbrams seemed profoundly exhausted now, but Miss Peregrine more so. I could see her strength failing. Her human nature seemed to be winning out over her bird nature. "Come on, Miss Wren," Bronwyn cried. "You can do it, Miss Wren," called Horace. "Bring her back to us." "Please," said Althea. "We require absolute silence." After a long time, Miss Peregrine quit struggling and lay on the ground with her wings splayed, gasping for air, feathered chest heaving. Miss Wren took her hands off the bird and sat back on her haunches. "It's about to happen," she said, "and when it does, I don't want any of you to rush over here grabbing at her. Your Imbram will likely be very confused, and I want the first face she sees and voice she hears to be mine. I'll need to explain to her what's happened." And then she clasped her hands to her chest and murmured, "Come back to us, Alma. Come on, sister. Come back to us." Althea stepped down from the table and picked up a sheet, which she unfolded and held up in front of Miss Peregrine to shield her from view. When Miss Imbram turned From when embryos turned from birds to humans, they were naked. This would give her some privacy. We waited in breathless suspense while a succession of strange noises came from behind the sheet. An expulsion of air, a sound like someone clasping their hands once sharply, and then Miss Wren jumped up and took a shaky step backward. She looked frightened. Her mouth was open, and so was Althea's. And then Miss Wren said, "No, this can't be." And Althea stumbled, faint, letting the sheet drop. And there on the floor we saw a human form, but not a woman's. He was naked, curled into a ball, his back to us. He began to stir and uncurl and finally to stand. "Is that Miss Peregrine?" said Olive. "She came out funny." Clearly it was not. The person before us bore no resemblance whatsoever to Miss Peregrine. He was a stunt little man with knobby knees and a balding head and a nose like a used pencil eraser, and he was stark naked and slimed head to toe with sticky, translucent gel, while Miss Wren gaped at him and grasped for something to steady herself against. In shock and anger, the others all began to shout, "Who are you? Who are you? What have you done with Miss Peregrine?" Slowly, the man raised his hands to his face and rubbed his eyes. Then, for the first time, he opened them. The pupils were blank and white. I heard someone scream. Then, very calmly, the man said, "My name is Cayule, and you are all my prisoners now." "Prisoners?" said the folding man with a laugh. What he mean we are prisoners?" Emma shouted at Miss Wren. "Where's Miss Peregrine? Who's this man? And what have you done with Miss Peregrine?" Miss Wren seemed to have lost the ability to speak. As our confusion turned to shock and anger, we barraged the little man with questions. He endured them with a slightly bored expression, standing at the center of the room with his hands folded demurely over his privates. "If you'd actually permit me to speak, I'll explain everything," he said. "Where is Miss Peregrine?" Emma shouted again, trembling with rage. "Don't worry," Cal said. "She's safely in our custody. We kidnapped her days ago on your island." "Then the bird we rescued from the submarine," I said. That was me," Kuehl said. "Impossible," said Ms. Wren, finally finding her voice. "Whites can't turn into birds." "That is true as a general rule, but Alma is my sister, you see, and though I wasn't fortunate enough to inherit any of her talents for manipulating time, I do share her most useless trait, the ability to turn into a vicious little bird of prey. I did a rather excellent job impersonating her, don't you think?" And he took a little bow. "Now, may I trouble you for some pants? You have me at a disadvantage." His request was ignored. Meanwhile, my head was spinning. I remembered Miss Peregrine once mentioning that she'd had 2 brothers. I'd seen their photo, actually, when they were all in the care of Miss Avocat together. Then I flashed back to the days we'd spent with the bird we had believed was Miss Peregrine, all we'd gone through, everything we'd seen, the caged Miss Peregrine that Golan had thrown into the ocean, that had been the real one, while the one we rescued had been her brother. The cruel things Miss Peregrine had done recently made more sense now. That hadn't been Miss Peregrine at all, but I was still left with a million questions. All that time, I said, why did you stay a bird? Just to watch us? While my lengthy observations of your childish bickering were incontrollably fascinating, I was quite hoping you could help me with a piece of unfinished business. When you killed my men in the countryside, I was impressed. You proved yourselves to be quite resourceful. Naturally, my men could have swept in and taken you at any point after that, but I thought it better to let you twist in the wind a while and see if your ingenuity might not lead us to the one Embrum who's constantly managed to evade us. With that, he turned to Miss Wren and grinned broadly. Hello, Bella Siga. So good to see you again. Miss Wren moaned and fanned herself with her hand. You idiots. You idiots. You cretins. You morons, the clown shouted. You led them right to us. And as a nice bonus, said Cal, we paid a visit to your menagerie as well. My men came by not long after we left. The stuffed heads of that emu raff and boxer dog will look magnificent above my mantelpiece. You monster, Miss Wren screeched, and she fell back against the table, legs failing her. Oh, my bird, exclaimed Bronwyn, her eyes wide. Fiona and Claire. You'll see them again soon, Cal said. I've got them in safekeeping. It all began to make a terrible kind of sense. Cal knew he'd be welcomed into Miss Wren's menagerie disguised as Miss Peregrine, and when she wasn't at home to be kidnapped, he'd nudged us after her toward London. In so many ways, we'd been manipulated from the very beginning, from the moment we chose to leave the island and I chose to go along. Even the tale he'd chosen for Bronwyn to read that first night in the forest about the stone giant. Giant had been a manipulation. He wanted us to find Miss Wren's loop and think that it was we who'd cracked its secret. Those of us who weren't reeling in horror frothed with anger. Several people were shouting that Cal should be killed and were busily hunting for sharp objects to do the job with, while the few who'd kept their heads were trying to hold them back. All the while, Cal stood calmly, waiting for the furor to die down. If I may, he said, I wouldn't entertain any ideas about killing me. You could, of course, no one can stop you, but it will go much easier for you if I am unharmed when my men arrive. He pretended to check a non-existent watch on his wrist. Ah, yes, he said. They should be here now. Yes, just about now, surrounding the building, covering every conceivable point of exit, including the roof. And, might I add, there are 56 of them, and they are armed positively to the teeth, beyond the teeth. Have you ever seen what a minigun can do to a child-sized human body? He looked directly at Olive and said, I would turn you to cat's meat, darling. You're bluffing, said Enoch. There's no one out there. I assure you there is. They've been watching me closely since we left your depressing little island, and I gave my signal to them the moment Balasiga revealed herself to us. That was over 12 hours ago. More than ample time to muster a fighting force. Allow me to verify this, said Miss Wren, and she left to go to the interim meeting room, where the windows were obstructed from ice, mostly from the outside, and a few had small telescope tunnels melting through them with mirror attachments that let us look down at the street below. While we waited for her to return, the clown and the snake girl debated the best ways to torture Cal. I say we pull out his toenails first, said the clown, then stick hot pokers in his eyes. Where I come from, the snake girl said, the punishment for treason is being covered in honey, bound to an open boat, and floated out into a stagnant pond. The flies eat you alive. Cal stood, cricking his neck from side to side and stretching his arms boredly. Apologies, he said. Remaining a bird for so long tends to cramp the muscles. You think we're kidding, said the clown. I think you're amateurs, said Cal. If you found a few young bamboo shoots, I could show you something really wicked. As delightful as that would be, though, I do recommend you melt this ice, because it'll save us all a world of trouble. I say this for your sake, out of genuine concern for your well-being. Yeah, right, said Emma. Where was your concern when you were stealing those peculiar souls? Ah, yes, our three prisoners. Our three pioneers. Their sacrifice was necessary, all for the sake of progress, my dears. What we're trying to do is advance the peculiar species, you see. What a joke, she said. You're nothing but power-hungry sadist.